Hello everyone, so let's continue chapter 2. So we stopped at the point where the worker is going to decide between how many hours of leisure, or you can think of it as work, right? Um, that maximizes their satisfaction or their utility. So we said that we have kind of two goods, one is consumption and one is leisure. And these two goods is it's like pizza and coke in microeconomics. One of the things that the worker has different combinations between consumption and leisure that they can choose, but the most important thing is each and every point around along this indifference curve would give the same amount of satisfaction. This is you. Not only this, we also discussed the budget constraints. So there is a certain constraint for this work. And the most important point that matters to us is the point of tangency. So the point of tangency between the two lines is the point at which would give the optimal decision for the consumer, I should say, like the worker. So the optimal consumption decision is given at the point where the budget line is tangent to the indifference curve. So we already mentioned that the slope of the indifference curve is called the marginal rate of substitution, which is, you can write it this way, it's the change in consumption due to the change in leisure time, right? And it's basically the marginal utility of leisure divided by the marginal utility of consumption, and we know that it's negative, so we have a negative sign. So the slope of this curve has to be equal to the slope of the budget line, where the slope of the budget line is equal to the wage, right? So the slope of the budget line is again the change in consumption, or let me write it the same way. The change in consumption because of the change in leisure, right, which is equal to negative W. So in other words, our optimal decision has to equate these two parts, the slope of the indifference curve with the slope of the budget line. This would give the optimal decision bundle for the worker. So point P here, for example, is the point at which the worker is going to decide that he or she is going to have 70 hours of leisure, or you can think of it as 40 hours of work, right? Because if we go this way, leisure increases, work hours decreases. If we go this way, it's just the opposite. So I can either look at this axis or look at this axis, whatever you feel. But we are usually using this one. So at point P, the worker is choosing 70 hours of leisure. The remaining here between 110 and 70 is the 40 hours of work, right? So 70 hours of leisure and $500 consumption. This is called indifference curve U star because it's the point at which, because it gives the point at which we have the optimal decision bundle. Of course, the higher the indifference curve, the higher the utility of the worker, but it's unattainable, right? Because it's not tangent to the indifference curve. If we go this way, it's a lower utility, so it's not rational for the consumer or the worker to choose any point along this indifference curve because he or she can afford a higher indifference curve and be at point P. Okay, so two things to discuss. What is the impact of the change in non-labor income on hours of work? Okay, so if we have an increase in non-labor income, this would lead to a parallel shift, right? As you can see it here, this line is parallel to this line, so they have the same slope. We didn't change anything in the slope. And if there is an increase in, if we have an increase in non-labor income, we will move from point P0 to point P1, and as we can see, the worker is enjoying more hours of work, right? So here we see that the worker is, with the increase in non-labor income, there is an increase in hours of work. Of course, this is just one possibility because we can have just the opposite. So we can have the opposite in which, okay, there is an increase in the non-labor income. Again, I still have the shift, which is parallel lines, but I have a decrease in leisure time. Okay, so we have two possible outcomes that can happen. So we can write it this way. If there is an increase in non-labor income, we have two things that can happen. So it's two possibilities. Okay, but in both possibilities, the budget line shifts upward. Okay, so the budget line shifts upward. Okay, so this is gonna happen under the two possibilities. But we can have the hours, I'm gonna write it as this, hours of leisure or hours worked can decrease, or hours worked can increase. So we have two possibilities. So under the first option, if income or non-labor income, it's not the wage, right, increases, then in this possibility, the worker is going to buy or increase the demand of, let me write it, buy more leisure, as if leisure is a certain good, right? They're gonna buy more leisure. And if you remember from microeconomics, whenever income increases and you buy more, then this is considered a normal good. Like this is a normal behavior, right? So this is a normal good. As income increases, you demand more of the good, then this means that this good is considered a normal good. The other option is your non-labor income increases, hours of work increases. That means we can just write it this way: income increases, you buy less leisure time. Under this possibility, leisure is considered as inferior good. So what is an inferior good? Inferior good is any good that when your income goes up, you demand less of it. Okay? So there are two possibilities that can happen. But from here onwards, until the end of this chapter, we will consider this possibility, that leisure is a normal good. You're getting more income, let's say from the stock market, or you inherited some amount of income, you will buy more leisure time. You will reduce your hours of work. So from here onwards, we will assume that this is the possibility that we will work on. Okay, we are not going to consider this option, but it's for you to remember that this can also happen in real life. Okay, where the consumer can start valuing leisure time when they get more income. Okay, they start to work less. So let's go back to the slides. As we said, we can have two options, right? The first one, which we call the income effect, and the other one is a substitution effect. Okay, So when we have, just a second, let me just check something. Okay, so just notice that this is a non-labor income. So here we are not talking about wages. Okay, so these two options that I just discussed are related to non-labor income. Now let's discuss labor income. Okay, so let's discuss what happens when wages increases. So when the wage increases, um, so wage goes up, I can buy more leisure, okay, or I can buy less leisure. So if I buy more, then this is called income effect. If I buy less, then this is called substitution effect. You are substituting work for leisure. So the one that has a positive impact is the income effect. The one that has a negative impact is the substitution effect. So if the end result is positive, then the income effect dominates the substitution effect. If the final effect is negative, where wage increases, I reduce leisure time, then it's a substitution effect dominating the income effects. So we have it here. When income effect dominates the substitution effect, the hours worked, the worker increases hours of leisure in response to the increase in wage. So here, for example, we started from 70, we ended at 75 hours of leisure. Okay, so wage was $10 an hour, it becomes $20 an hour. And remember, wage is the slope of the budget line. So wage is the slope of the budget line. Wage used to be 10, now it's 20. The slope increases, so it's gonna rotate upwards. The slope increases, becomes more steeper. And when it becomes more steeper, you started to value your leisure time more. If you remember when we were comparing two people, right? Here, steeper means you are valuing, right? Leisure is relatively more, workers with steeper curve value their leisure relatively more than workers with shallow indifference curve. So the steeper indifference curve, the more that the worker is valuing leisure time more. Okay? So they demand more of leisure time. We can also have another possibility where you start at 70 but you end at less leisure time. In this situation, substitution, you are substituting work for leisure, right, dominates the income effect. The negative effect is bigger than the positive effect, so you work less. So you demand less leisure. Okay, so let me show you this kind of a summary. So as wage, and we call this labor income, as wage increases, we have two possibilities. You are moving from point P to point R, right? P to R, and an increase in leisure. P to R, a decrease in leisure. Okay, so we have two possibilities. So P to R, wage increase, leisure time increase. Or I'm moving from P to R again, but wage increase, leisure time decrease. Okay, so wage increase, leisure increase, it's positive impact. In other words, income effect dominates or bigger than substitution effect. Sorry, the iPad is little slippery. So substitution effect. Okay, here just the opposite. Income increase so it's labor income increases, leisure time decreases, so it's negative. So in this is just the opposite, so income effect is less, right, than substitution effect, or substitution effect dominates the income effect. Okay, so if you check the first one, here we have a jump or an increase from 70 hours of work to 75. Here we have a decrease in hours of work from, a decrease in hours of leisure from 70 to 65. Okay. So finally, the worker is going to decide, okay, when or how many hours of work or versus hours of leisure they going to demand. All right. So let me stop here and I'm going to record another video.